This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Beis. Parshas Tetzaveh. So the Parsha begins speaking about the Shemen Zayis Zach that was needed for the menorah, the Hadlakas Ner menorah. So the question is, this would seem to be completely out of place. Parshas Truma, of course, talks about the construction of the Mishkan. You have the building of the Aron, the Shulchan, the menorah, the various Kalim, the pillars, the Krashim, the Adonim, the Yerios. It's talking about V'yasuli Mikdash, the construction of the Mishkan. Parshas Tetzaveh talks about the Big Day Kahuna, right? Talks about the Mitznefes, the Me'il, the Ksaynes, the Ephod, the Chayshen, and so forth. So you have Parshas Truma talks about the Binyan HaMishkan. Parshas Tetzaveh talks about the Big Day Kahuna. The inyan of V'yikhu Elech Hashem and Zayazach is not something needed for the Binyan, and it's not something needed for the Big Day Kahuna. What was it? It was a chelak of the Avodah. Hadlakas Ner Menorah is part of the Avodah. So you know where this little Parsha should be? Should be in Sefer Vayikra. What's it doing smack in between Parshas Truma and Parshas Tetzaveh? It's out of place, yeah? This is the question of the Chassam Sofer in Mahadura Riviyah, in the 4th edition of the Chidushim of the Chassam Sofer. I have not yet been able to get my hands on this Sefer, but nevertheless, the Chassam Sofer in the 4th edition. I have the 1st edition, I have the 3rd edition, I don't even know what happened to the 2nd edition, and this is from the 4th edition of the Chidush Chassam Sofer.
And how many editions? The only 4?
I don't know.
Oh.
More than 4.
So that's the Kasha L'Chassam Sofer. Says the Chassam Sofer, you have to go back to Parshas Truma. In Parshas Truma, it lists what Rashi calls the 13 tools, the 13 ingredients necessary to build the Mishkan. The gold, the silver, the copper, the blue wool, the purple wool, and so forth. And then it says the following: Shemen Lamar, oil for illumination. So Tosfos asks, the Dasakeni Valiyat Tosfos, oil was not an ingredient, it was not a building block of the Mishkan. Why is Shemen Lamar on the list of things needed to build the Mishkan? I mean, it doesn't talk about flour for the Lechem HaPanim, it doesn't talk about animals for the Carbon Tamid, it's not talking about things necessary for the Avodah. So why does it talk about Shemen Lamar? Shemen Lamar was needed to light the menorah. It's not an ingredient in making the Mishkan, it's an ingredient in the day-to-day service of the Mishkan. Says Tosfos the following. You can take a look in Parshas Truma in the Dasakena Mibaliyat Tosfos. Says Tosfos, Shemen Lamar. He says, Tema, Shekola Parsha B'tzarchi Binyan. The whole Parshas Truma is talking about the building of the Mishkan. Yeah? Chutz mi pasuk zeh. Except for this pasuk, Shehut Tzarach Shulchan Gavaya. This was light needed for Hashem. Says Tosfos, V'Shemen Lamar, Shekein Derech Hamelachim lahadlik ner lefneim koidim sheyichnesu labayis. Right? You know, like Motel 6, we'll leave the light on for you, right? So says Tosfos that it's when a king entered a house, he goes into a dark house, the final step in building any house is what? Gotta flick the lights on. You gotta turn. What good is a house without lights? So therefore Tosfos says, you know what the Makkah B'Patish was? You know what the final step in building the Mishkan was? Yeah, you have beams, you have pillars, you have furniture, but you gotta turn on the lights. Shemen Lamar. We're not talking about the oil for the menorah. That's something else. But the menorah also provided another element, and that element was, the final step in building a house is, you gotta turn on the lights.
But the Gemara asks, V'chilo
so Rav Shlomo says, the Gemara asks l'chila oretzach, and Tosfos also asks that question. V'yaf agav delav la'orehu tzarach mikal makom hu kavod shamayla. Hashem doesn't need it, but still it's an honor to Hashem. In other words, why do we have a light in the shul? Be'urim kibdu es Hashem. So therefore, what is the makabah? What's the hashlamas habinyan? What's the final step in building a house? Turning on the lights. Says the Chassam Sofer, now we understand the beginning of this week's Parsha. After talking about all the various steps in building the Mishkan, and building the Menorah, and building the Aron, and building the Shulchan, and building the Krashim, and the Yerios, but what's the final step needed before we go into the next inyan of Big Day Kahuna? V'yata Tetzaveh es b'nei Yisrael v'yikchu elecha shemen zayisach. That's what it's doing over here. That's why it's not in Vayikra. Because we're not bringing it in because it's a chelak of the Avodah. We're bringing it in because this is The final blow. The final step. We turn the lights on, right? We left the lights on for you. This is the final step before you're able to enter the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi say, today we're going to speak about a topic that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses. We know that our shuls are Ahi Lahem LaMikdash Ma'at, that our shuls are a Mikdash Ma'at. So we want to speak today a little bit about Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses. Okay, we're not talking about now today talking by davening. We want to know, are you allowed to talk in a shul? No, obviously not by davening here. We're talking about, are you allowed to go over to your friend and say in a shul, how you doing? How's everything? How's the family? Or not? Or you're not allowed to do that. We want to know, because we know. If you look in Sefer Chavetz Chaim, the mitzvah sasei da'iraisa umekdashi tiro, you have to fear the Beis HaMikdash. Chavetz Chaim says applies even to a shul. So, for instance, the Chavetz Chaim says if somebody speaks Lashon Hara in a shul, not only is he violating the law of Lashon Hara, he's also violating a mitzvah da'iraisa of umekdashi tiro. So I want to know, what are the laws of Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses? Are you allowed to eat in a shul? Are you allowed to drink in a shul? Are you allowed to do your taxes in a shul? Are you allowed to go into the shul if it's snowing outside to protect you from the snow? What are the halachos of the shul? We're going to talk about shuls in transit, shuls moving, shuls flying, and that's what we're going to speak about today. Flying shuls. Okay? So let's start with the Gemara Megillah, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph to Chav Ches Amud Beis. Says the Gemara. Tan Rabbana. Bate Knesiyos, shuls. Ein noyagin bahen kalos roish. One cannot be lightheaded in a shul. Okay? Don't joke around. Ein oichlin bahen. Ein oichlin bahem. You can't eat. Ve'ein shoysim bahen. You're not allowed to drink. Ve'ein neyosin bahem. You can't, enjoy it in there. You can't take a suntan. Let's say you have a sunroof and you're going to take out your hammock to get, direct sunlight in the shul. You can't do that in the shul.
It's in our time when it's Bet HaMikdash and shul.
We'll see. We're just starting. Okay? That's what the Gemara says straight out. The Gemara doesn't qualify, doesn't explain. Ein metalim bahem. You can't take a spatzir. People, they exercise every day. What do you do in the winter? They go to the mall, right? They go to these big malls and they walk. If you have a big shul, you can't walk up and down the aisle.
In the sukkah, you said metalable.
Right. In the sukkah, you could, but not in the shul, right? You can't go into the shul when it's hot outside. You can't take refuge in the shul from the rain, right? You get off at a bus, and now it's raining outside, so now you want to go inside to keep dry. Now to do that, you cannot eulogize an individual in a shul. Aval kairin bahen, but you can learn. V'shoinin bahen, and you're allowed to learn mishnayos. Umaspiden bahem hesped shel rabim, and you're allowed to eulogize something that is relevant to the tzibur. Okay, Gemara, the Beis continues. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amosai. When you're not allowed to do these things? Be shuvan. That's when the shul is functioning. Aval b'chorbanon, but when the shul has fallen into disuse and nobody davens there anymore, and they're just waiting around until they sell the shul. Manichin oisan. Now what do? You leave it. Va'oilin b'hen asavim. You let grass grow in the shul. V'lo yitloish. Don't uproot the grass. Mipnei agmas nefesh. You want to cause people pain. You want to trouble people. When they see weeds are growing in the shul, they're going to be very upset by that. So Gemara asks, what are we talking about grass for? Where did the grass come from? What do you mean let grass grow? What, somebody planted grass in the shul? What does it mean let grass grow? Asavim andach hashmayu. Who said anything about grass? Says the Gemara, Chesuri mechsur avachik. The Beis is missing some words, and this is what it means to say. Umechabdin oisam. You're supposed to sweep a shul. You have to sweep a shul. You have to vacuum a shul. Umar bitzin oisan. You're supposed to sprinkle the shul with water, right, to keep the dust settled. You don't want grass growing in a shul. It's not bakavadik to have grass growing in the shul.
So why is it gmad nefesh to lash them?
Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amosai, when are you supposed to sweep a shul and sprinkle water on the shul so that grass doesn't grow? B'yishuvan. That's only when the shul is functioning. Aval b'chorbanon. But when a shul has fallen into disuse, manichin oisan, we let the shul be. Don't sweep it. Don't water it. Manichin oisan lalos. We let grass grow. In other words, when a shul has fallen into disuse, we let grass grow in the shul. Alu bahem asavim. But if grass grows in a shul that has fallen into disuse, lo yitloish mibnei agmas nefesh. Do not uproot the grass so that people will be troubled by it. And Rashi says they'll put to their heart to rebuild the shul. So basically, bottom line, you're not allowed to use a shul for any purpose other than to learn and to daven. You have to take care of the shul. But a shul that's fallen into disuse, you sort of let it fall apart so that finally maybe the rich people will wake up and rebuild the shul. That's the bottom line. Now here's the key. Amar Ravasi, here's the key to the whole day. You ready? Amar Ravasi.
So it's good to have the grass there, but that's the point?
Yeah, you're supposed to leave it in disuse. In other words, you have an old shul, and now, the window starts caving in. Don't fix it. Don't fix it. You want the people to pay attention and rebuild the shul. Okay. Amar Ravasi. Bate knesiyos shebebavel al tenai hein asuyin. The shuls in Bavel are built with a stipulation. Now when we say Bavel over here, it doesn't just mean Babylonia. It means Babylonia, America, South America, North America, South Dakota, right? Everywhere in the world except for Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Shuls in Bavel are built on Tanai. Now we have to understand, what's the Tanai? They're built on Tanai that you could use the shul for your own purposes. But we have to see what this means.
You said it now.
Now, that's what the Gemara says. They're built on a Tanai. What's the Tanai? The Gemara doesn't say what the Tanai is. They're built on a Tanai. By the way, let's look at Rashi in number 8. Rashi tells us, what's the Tanai? Al menas sheyishtam shubahen. Shuls outside of Eretz Yisrael are built with a Tanai that you could use them, that you could eat in them, that you could drink in them, that you could go in them if it's raining. You could use a shul. That's what Rashi says. Shuls in Bavel, shuls in Chutz La'aretz are built with a Tanai. But, afal pikein ein noyagin bohen kalas roish. Even though they're built with a Tanai, you can't be lightheaded in the shul. Says the Gemara, what's an example of being lightheaded? Who won last night? What's an example of being lightheaded? Umay niyu cheshbonos. In other words, don't do your tax return. Now, we're not talking about who won last night. Of course you're not allowed to do in a shul. Of course you're not allowed to do that. You're not even allowed to sit down and calculate your budget. Okay? Umay niyu cheshbonos. Amar Ravasi, Beis HaK'nesses shemechashven by cheshbonos. A shul that you make calculations in the shul, malinin bayas hames. You need to leave dead bodies over in the shul. So Gemara asks, what? Because you did one thing wrong, you have to do another thing wrong. Malinin sargedaitach. You think you have to leave over dead bodies? It's not enough what you did by making the cheshbonos. Now you have to add insult to injury and do another thing wrong? Says Gemara, no. In the end, you're going to be punished that somebody nebuch. You're going to have to use the shul as a place for the Chevra Kadisha. Okay, so this is the bottom line. The Gemara says you can't use a shul, but in Bavel you could use a shul. But make sure you're not noyei kalas roish. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Now the question is, why do they make a Tanai on shuls in Bavel and not in Eretz Yisrael? What's the difference between a shul in Bavel and a shul in Eretz Yisrael? A shul is a shul. What's the difference? What, because it has Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, you can't make a Tanai? It's not a different shul because it's in Eretz Yisrael. So look at Tosfos. Listen to this. But HaK'nesses shel Bavel al Tanai hein asuyin. Roitz aloymar. Says Tosfos, you know when a Tanai helps? Kozman shehin betelen. A Tanai of using a shul only helps when a shul is no longer being used. But so long as a shul is being used, you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't go in there, you can't do anything in a shul other than daven and learn.
Tanai won't help?
Tanai doesn't help if the shul is a regular shul. That's what Tosfos Shita is.
So like Eretz Yisrael.
The Tanai is irrelevant. The Tanai only helps if the shul, nobody's davening in the shul anymore. Okay, so that's very strict. That means you can't eat your shudas in the shul. You can't have your yard side in the shul. You can't go into the shul if it's pouring outside. That's what Tosfos Shita is. Alright? No prejudices here, right? The Hachazinon bebraisa Dilael. Tosfos says, how do I know that a Tanai doesn't help when a shul is in use? Because the Gemara says earlier that that it was raining outside, and the Amoram did not want to enter the shul because it was raining. Only why? Elamishum deshmaita ba'itzilusa. Only because learning needs a certain clarity. So Tosfos says like this. Here the Amoram. It's snowing outside. They're learning Gemara. They didn't want to go inside. Why not? Where do the Amoram live? They live in Yerushalayim? No, they live in Bavel. And I thought shuls in Bavel were built out tonight. So why couldn't these Amoraim go into the shul to protect themselves? The only heter they could come up with was that they would not be able to learn as well outside. Says Tosfos, why do I need that heter? Why couldn't they use the heter that shuls in Bavel were built on Tanai? It must be that Tanai only helps when the shul is no longer being used. But so long as the shul is being used, the Tanai doesn't work. And our Gemara that says shuls are built on Tanai only helps when the shul is destroyed. The Azmahani Tanai. So now the question is, why does the Tanai only help in Bavel and not in Eretz Yisrael? Now you ready for this? This is whopper. This is a whopper. V'davka la'oisan shebebavel. A Tanai only helps for shuls in Bavel. Why? Shaharei la'es ba'goyal b'mhera b'yamenu. Because when Mashiach comes, tifka kedushasan. Shuls will not have any kedusha anymore. But shuls in Eretz Yisrael, loy mahani Tanai. The Tanai doesn't help. Shaharei kedushasan la'olam kayames. The kedusha of shuls in Eretz Yisrael are eternal. You hear what I'm saying? You ever hear such a big chiddush in your life?
No.
That a shul in Chutz Aretz only has temporary kedusha. So therefore, you could play around with the kedusha. You could say, I stipulate that when nobody davens in the shul anymore, then I could enter because of the rain. Then I could eat in the shul. Again, Tosfos is saying two chidushim. Number one, that a Tanai only helps when a shul is not being used. When a shul is being used, Tanai doesn't help. And now Tosfos supplies a reason for that. What's the reason? Because the kedusha of shuls in Chutz La'aretz are temporary, but the kedusha of shuls in Eretz Yisrael are eternal. So the shul in Chutz La'aretz, which has temporary kedusha, you could stipulate and say that when no one's davening in the shul anymore, then the kedusha I could use the shul. But in Eretz Yisrael, where the shul has eternal kedusha, then you cannot make any tanam. So I would ask on Tosfos, where did Tosfos get this from? Who told Tosfos? Right? Like in yeshiva, our Rabbi used to say, which birdie told Tosfos that when Mashiach comes, shuls won't have kedusha anymore in Chutz La'aretz? Tosfos doesn't even cite a Gemara. What Tosfos is saying on his own, Tosfos is on his own, he's saying a chiddush that when Mashiach comes, shuls won't have kedusha anymore. Where does that come from? Why should that be? I mean, is there any concept in kedusha at all that the Gemara says, right? If you ever learned in Masechta Kedushin, kedusha loipaka b'chdi. Kedusha can't just dissipate, right? You get married after a month, it's finished. Whoa, how did it end? No, it just dissipated. No such thing. Kedusha loipaka b'chdi. If you make something hektish, you have to be paided. It doesn't just leave. So where did Tosfos get that when Mashiach comes, shuls and Chutz La'aretz won't have kedusha? Fine, we have to address that.
Don't they say the Orthodox will go to Eretz Yisrael?
Good. So then they will have kedusha. So we'll have to deal with that. Okay. Then Tosfos says, "V'im Taimar, kivan de mahani Tanai lo'osan shebebavel." If a Tanai helps for shuls in Bavel, then the Gemara earlier said that Ravina wanted to plant in a shul even after it was destroyed, and he didn't plant in the shul. He didn't. Why not? But I thought Tosfos' shita is a Tanai helps for a shul in Bavel for after it's destroyed. Says Tosfos, a Tanai does not help for something which is a bizayon, and planting in a shul is a bizayon. Now, you ready for this? You ready? So, if you would ask Tosfos, halacha l'maisa, you're in a shul, you're unwrapping your tefillin, can you turn to the guy next to you and say, how was yesterday? How was the trip? No, it's an Isser Dairaisa. Tosfos says you can't even plant in a shul. Tosfos says you can't even sit down and quietly write your budget. So of course you can't talk to your friend. What about after the shul is destroyed? Could you enter, you're going on one of these Jewish heritage tours, and you're going into a shul, it hasn't been used in 500 years. Could you go over to the guy and say, wow, what a beautiful architecture? Maybe that you could say. But could you say, what are they serving in the hotel for supper? Of course not. It's an Isser Dairaisa. A shul, a Tanai does not help according to Tetzaveh, even when the shul is not being used. I'm not saying, this is not mine. This is not my Torah. There's Tetzaveh. Yeah? That's Tetzaveh.
Example in the Mary Shul went to Shanghai, and they had that big shul.
Yeah.
And it wasn't used in 50 years.
Yeah.
That would be an example.
Yeah, okay.
There,
fine.
You're allowed to ask your friend.
Tetzaveh's Shita is a Tanai, only helps when a shul is in disuse, and even so, it only helps for neutral purposes. Let's say it's snowing outside. So according to Tetzaveh, what you could do? If you have a shul that's not being used, and it's snowing outside, you could go into the shul. But make sure you don't ask your friend where he got his rubbers from. That's Tetzaveh's Shita. Now we have to see, do we paskin like Tetzaveh? Do we not paskin like Tetzaveh? And I would suggest that we're going to be extremely surprised as to what is the bottom line halacha today. Be very surprised. Okay? Now let's deal with what Rabbi Boaz was asking. Tetzaveh says that when Mashiach comes, shuls in Bavel will not have Kedusha anymore. So we asked, where did Tetzaveh get this from? So we could ask, perhaps, a Bekias question, maybe a better question. The Gemara says on the next Amud, take a look at number 3. Rabbi Lezer HaKaper Omer. Rabbi Lezer HaKaper says, Asidin bate knesiyos ubate midrashos shebe Bavel sheyikbu ube'eretz Yisrael. In the future, the shuls, the bate midrashim in Chutz Haaretz are going to be supplanted, going to be uprooted, and they're going to fly to Eretz Yisrael. Remember that we all heard before, right? We've been hearing that since we're 3 years old. Yep. That you have to be careful with the shul because one day it's going to fly up and all the shuls are going to fly to Eretz Yisrael. Yep. Fine. Shenemar. What's the source of this? So the Gemara makes a Kal V'chomer. The Gemara says the following. The Gemara says that when Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai, we were all there, but you know who else was there? A lot of mountains came. Har Tavar came. Har HaKarmel came. They all flew to Har Sinai at the time Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael. Says the Gemara Kal V'chomer, if Tavar and Carmel, how long did they come for Kabbalas HaTorah? A few hours. They just made a guest appearance at Har Sinai for Kabbalas HaTorah. They came to be Mekabel the Torah for a few hours. And then what happened to them ultimately? They were planted in Eretz Yisrael. So a Beis HaK'nesses and a Beis HaMedrash that were Marbitz Torah, all the more so, Kal V'chomer, they're going to be uprooted and moved to Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Got the Kal V'chomer. If Har Tavar, Har HaKarmel, which only came to Har Sinai temporarily, were uprooted and went to Eretz Yisrael permanently, so a shul and a Beis Medrash that you learn Torah in, certainly, La'asilave, they're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. So ask the Magen Avram on Tetzaveh. By the way, the Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tetzaveh, that you can't use the shul for anything. Just by the way. And we're going to get to that. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tetzaveh. That, what is it, when everybody says, yeah, in Chutz Haaretz it's built out tonight, you know what that's going to do for you? That when nobody's using the shul and it's snowing outside, you could go. But you can't talk to your friend in it. Okay? Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tetzaveh. We'll have to see. Do we paskin like Tetzaveh? We'll see.
There was mention in the shul that like alternate parking, they talked about that once.
Alternate size parking in the shul?
No, in the shul. They made an announcement in the shul of that. And people said it wasn't allowed, it wasn't proper to say that. But the people
Halavai, that should be the worst thing that they say.
No, but in Flatbush they had such a discussion.
Yeah?
Everybody was getting involved.
Okay, well, so let's see. So that the Magen Avram asks, Vitzarchion, how could Tetzaveh say that when Mashiach comes, the shul's not going to have Kedusha anymore, but the Gemara says in Megillah, the shul's going to go to Eretz Yisrael, so we see it's going to have Kedusha. Take a look at number 4. This is a quote from the Shulchan Aruch who passes like Toisus, Shaharei k'sheyavai hagoyo b'mheira tifga kedushasa. V'tzarchian. Da'amrinam b'samach b'gemara asidin kol batei knesiyos shebebavel sheyikbu b'Eretz Yisrael. How could Toisus say that when Mashiach comes, shuls won't have kedusha? But the Gemara says on the next Amud that all the shuls are going to fly to Eretz Yisrael. So now you ready for this chiddush of the Magen Avram? When does the Gemara say a shul is going to fly to Eretz Yisrael? That's when the shul is being used. But Tosfos is talking about when a shul is b'chorbanan. A shul that is not being used is staying put, is not going to Eretz Yisrael. What Eretz Yisrael needs an old shul that nobody's using? It's bad enough no one's using it in America. We have to schlep it to Eretz Yisrael for nobody to use.
So why are you using your bodies?
So therefore, like this, when the Gemara says shuls are going to fly to Eretz Yisrael, that's a shul that's being used. But Tosfos is talking about b'chorbanan. So since it's b'chorbanan, it's not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. V'tzarach loymar, the ha-Tosfos kai a-b'chorbanan. Tosfos is talking about shuls that are in disuse. The kivan shenechravu. Since they're destroyed, kaidam bias hagaya, before Mashiach comes, la yikbu be'eretz Yisrael. They're not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Very sad. Wow. You know, you drive down Coney Island Avenue, and you see, the Beis Tifla, that was once a Beis Tefillah.
Yeah, it's a Magen David.
Yeah, unfortunately, it ain't going anywhere. It's not, when Mashiach comes, it's going to stay. That, according to the Magen Avraham. Only a shul that's being used is going to Eretz Yisrael. That's the answer of the Magen Avraham. Then the Magen Avraham says, let me tell you an answer that I don't like. What's the answer I don't like? That may be like this. You know what's going to go to Eretz Yisrael? The building will go to Eretz Yisrael. But the real estate is going to stay put. So since the real estate is going to stay put, when Mashiach comes, the ground that you're standing on won't have Kedusha anymore. What Tosfos means that when Mashiach comes, shuls won't have Kedusha, the walls will have Kedusha, the ceiling will have Kedusha, because that will fly to Eretz Yisrael. But the ground won't have Kedusha, and therefore maybe that is why you can make a T'nai in a shul in Chutz Aretz. Says the Magen Avraham, you know why I don't like that answer? Because from where do we learn that shuls are going to go to Eretz Yisrael? What's the source? It's a Kavachomer. Kavachomer from what? Har Tavar and Carmel. Har Tavar and Carmel is real estate, it's land. If that land went to Eretz Yisrael, Kavachomer, the land of the shul will go to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore you can't say, says the Magen Avraham, that when the Gemara says shuls are going to fly to Eretz Yisrael, it's only the bricks and not the land, since we learn it out from Har Tavar. Okay. Comes the Karban Asanel. Karban Asanel is a parish on the Rosh. And the Karban Asanel says, let's think for a moment. What was the Magen Avram's answer? Magen Avram's answer is, why are you allowed to make a T'nai on a shul? Because we're talking about a shul that's not in use. And a shul that's not in use, is it going to go to Eretz Yisrael? No, it's not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Karban Asanel, how could you say such a thing? That means, Tosfos holds, that why are you allowed to go into a shul that's not being used in Bavel? Because that shul eventually is not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Karban Asanel, how do you know? Isn't there halacha that if grass grows in a shul that's not being used, you shouldn't take it out? Why? Because you want to encourage people to rebuild it. So how do you know when it's snowing outside that you could go into the shul that's not being used, but aren't you hoping that it will be rebuilt? And if it will be rebuilt, it will go to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, says the Karban Asanel, I don't accept the answer of the Magen Avraham that Tosfos is saying that a shul that's not being used won't go to Eretz Yisrael, but you don't know that. You don't know what's going to be. You're hoping that some gvir will pass by and say, this was once a beautiful shul. Here's $1 million. Do over the shul. That's what you're hoping for. So says the Karban Asanel, take a look on the fourth line. After he quotes the Magen Avraham, the Karban Asanel says, the kasha, why are we not concerned that maybe it will be built before Mashiach comes? Like the Gemara says that if grass grows, don't uproot it because of agmas nefesh. Says the Karban Asanel, I have a different pshat in Tosfos. You ready for this? I feel that shuls will all go to Eretz Yisrael.
The land will go.
But you're not going to daven in them. They're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. But you think you're still going to daven in the same shul that you davened here? You think, this is my makom kavua, I'm writing my name on it, and even when Mashiach comes, you sit in my seat, I'll kick you so hard, right? What do you think the shul's going to go to Eretz Yisrael, but you're not davening in those shuls, says the Karban Asanel. The shul will go to Eretz Yisrael, and you'll have different museums. This was, the old shul. This Rav used to give shiurim, and maybe you'll have tours. All the tours will still be in business. In Eretz Yisrael, they'll take tours, but you're not going to daven there. He says, He says, "V'li nira deloy ka'amar elo sheyikbu be'eretz Yisrael dahainu ha'karka v'lo yeh b'hem kedushas Beis HaK'nesses." They're not going to have the kedusha of the shul. Ra kedushas Eretz Yisrael. Maybe if plants grow in the shul, you're chayv in truma and meiser, but it's not going to have kedushas Eretz Yisrael, right? So that's a chiddush of the Karban Asana. You know what Tosfos means? That when Mashiach comes, shuls won't go to. Well, the shuls won't go to Eretz Yisrael. The shuls won't have kedusha. They'll be uprooted. They'll go to Eretz Yisrael, but they'll just be Eretz Yisrael. They won't be a Beis HaK'nesses. Okay. Comes along the Chassam Sofer in the Tshuvas, Chelik Arachaim Siman Lamed, and the Chassam Sofer wants to say that the answer that the Magen Avram didn't like, he does like. What was the answer that the Magen Avram didn't like? Magen Avram said, maybe when the Gemara says the shuls will go to Eretz Yisrael, it means
only
the edifice.
The building.
But the karka will stay where it was.
Yeah.
So what was the Magen Avram's kasha on that? What do you mean? But the source that shuls go to Eretz Yisrael, Har Tavar. Har Tavar was real estate. So here too, the real estate should move. So some service says, Mamish Ga'inus. Think of the following. Har Tavar, where was it located? It was somewhere. And it got up, and it moved to Har Sinai. And then it was planted permanently in Eretz Yisrael. Says Chassam Sofer. So we learn from there that anything that gets up and moves to be part of a Davar Shebekdusha will eventually go to Eretz Yisrael and be planted there permanently. So now take a look at a Beis HaK'nesses. When you build a Beis HaK'nesses on Karka, did that Karka get up and move to that location to be part of that Beis HaK'nesses? That Karka never moved an iota in its whole life. The bricks moved. The bricks used to be located in New Jersey, near Paramus. And you went there, you picked it up in the truck, and you brought it to Kew Garden Hills. So the bricks uprooted themselves to be part of a shul. Kal v'chaymer, they'll go to Eretz Yisrael. But 73rd Avenue never moved. So if 73rd Avenue never moved, it is not going to be permanently supplanted in Eretz Yisrael. Says the Chassam Sofer, you have to think about the Kal v'chaymer. The Kal v'chaymer was that anything that is medaldel and netaltel, anything that moves from its place to go for a davar shebekdusha, will ultimately be moved to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, the bricks, the stones, the windows, which moved to be part of a shul, they will go to Eretz Yisrael. But the karka, the land that a shul was built on, it didn't move here to be the land. It was always the land. So since it didn't move to be the land, therefore it will not go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and therefore Tosfos says that since the land of a shul will not have eternal kedusha, because when Mashiach comes, the edifice will move, but the karka will lose its kedusha. Therefore, you can make a tanai in a shul b'chorbanan. Let me tell you one more answer. In all these answers, you could still ask, let's say in the Magen Avram's answer. The Magen Avram says that a shul that is in disuse, will not go to Eretz Yisrael. So what happens to the Kedusha? So Tosfos says, it leaves. Who says it leaves? How does Tosfos know it leaves? Unless Tosfos is learning that the Tanai is, I'm making a stipulation that the Kedusha should be temporary. But it's still hard to understand because we have a principle, Kedusha leipaka b'chdi. Kedusha doesn't just dissipate. You can't make a Tanai, I want my Kedushin to last for 30 days. I want my Hekdesh to last for 30 days. Even in the answer of the Karban Asana. What was the answer of the Karban Asana? It's going to go to Eretz Yisrael and lose its Kedusha. Why will it lose its Kedusha? So listen, this answer, the Kaf HaChaim, to me, is, I like the best. And it explains from where Tosfos knew that when Mashiach comes, the Kedusha of the shul will be removed. Take a look at this. V'oid yesh loymar. Yeah, number 7. Says the Kaf HaChaim in the second answer, he says like this. Yeah? Listen to what he says. He says, V'oid yesh loymar. Hada amar asidin kabate knesiyas. Ratzaloymar. HaKedusha shabahem tikba be'eretz Yisrael. The shul's not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. No. if all the shuls go to Eretz Yisrael, where is anybody going to live? You're going to have, skyscrapers of shuls. The shuls aren't going to Eretz Yisrael. The kedusha of the shul is going to pick up and go to Eretz Yisrael. The spiritual quality of the shul will be removed from the shul, and it will travel to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Kavachaim. The same way all the nitzotzei kedusha will travel to Eretz Yisrael and gather in Eretz Yisrael, just like Klal Yisrael will gather in Eretz Yisrael, Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses will go to Eretz Yisrael. But the shul is going to stay here. It's going to stay here.
So how Tavo
So
move?
therefore, what?
How Tavo
So
move?
in other words, the Kavachaim is explaining, you know how Tosfos knows that when Mashiach comes, shuls are not going to have Kedusha? You know where Tosfos got it from? He got it from the next Amud that says when Mashiach comes, the shuls are going to go to Eretz Yisrael, which Tosfos understood to mean the Kedusha of the shuls are going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Memela, the shuls won't have any Kedusha anymore.
So it's spiritual, not physical.
Exactly, spiritual.
So the spiritual...
The spiritual quality of the shul, the neshama of the shul, the nitzotzei hakdosha of the shul, they will go to Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi say these are three possible explanations for the opinion of Tosfos. Again, let's just get Tosfos' shita. Tosfos' shita is a Tanai only helps when a shul has fallen into disuse. Why does it only help for a shul in Bavel? Because Tosfos says when Mashiach comes, shuls in Bavel won't have Kedusha anymore. So we asked, what do you mean the Gemara says the shuls are going to go to Eretz Yisrael? The Kasha, the Magen Avram. Boaz's Kasha. What was the answer we gave? We gave three answers. Number one, the answer of the Magen Avram, that a shul that falls into disuse ain't going anywhere. We have the answer of the Karban Nesanel. Karban Nesanel's answer was, they will go to Eretz Yisrael, but they will not have Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses, they will only have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. By the way, the Karban Nesanel adds, because the whole Kavachomer is from Har Tavar. Har Tavar, when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, is only going to have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So, Dayo Levam and Adin, Leos Kenidon, which means when you make a Kavachomer, you can't learn out from more than the source, so therefore the shul will also only have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. Or you have the answer of the Chuvas Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer answers that the Kavachomer only works for something that uprooted itself to move to a shul. But the real estate of the shul, which was always there, is not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. And then you have the Kaf HaChaim's explanation that only the sparks of Kedusha of the shul are going to go to Eretz Yisrael. But bottom line is, Tosfos' shita is that a Tanai only helps when a shul is in disuse. When a shul is being used, you got to be very careful in a shul. So we're getting a little nervous. Because if we pass in like Tosfos, we are in big trouble. We're in big trouble.
It's the Shul of Kedusha.
What?
The Shul of Kedusha.
Yeah, well, everyone agrees the shul has Kedusha, but Tosfos is saying the Tanai doesn't work while the shul is being used. You can't eat, you can't drink, you can't sleep.
Well, when
So you can turn it to Bet Midrash.
What?
When the shul is not in use, there's a padlock on it, nobody can get it.
No. That's not b'chorbanon. You're not going to say when you lock the shul at night if the shul is b'chorbanon.
Nobody's using it.
No.
It's locked up.
No, that's not b'chorbanon. Chana means the shul is not a functioning shul anymore.
What's that then? What do they do?
Nothing. Nobody davens there. You know when.
Buildings in South
Using it for weddings?
No, it's not being used. Nobody davens there. They can't even get a minyan together.
What's the Shuls in the...
Whether it's locked or not, they're no the services.
There's no Sifrei Torah anymore.
What?
He took out the Sefer
Everything's
Torah.
gone. Yeah.
Everything is gone.
Yeah.
There's no Kedusha
No, why not?
because it's not. Nobody's davening there anymore.
So what? You're married. Let's say someone's married for 30 years, but the husband's in one country, the wife's in another country. They're still married. Kedusha lo paka b'chti. So the shul is a shul. It doesn't matter if nobody's in there. Where did it go? Where did the kedusha go? It can't just dissipate. So Tosfos says that when you make a Tanai, the Tanai only helps when the shul is in disuse. What does Rashi say? Well, let's go back to Rashi. Rashi says, what's the Tanai? Al menas sheyishtamshu bahen. The Tanai is, you could use a shul. The Tanai is in Chutz La'aretz. You could eat in a shul. You could drink in a shul. You could sleep in a shul. If it's raining outside, you could go in. If it's snowing outside, you could go in. So the Arzarua, who agrees to Rashi, asks, so why all these Amoram, they don't want to go into the shul because of the snow? That's only most of the Chasidus. They're only acting extra pious. But Me'echumra, they only wanted, that was a certain Zahirus they had. But Me'ikar Adin, Lefi Shitas Rashi, Lefi the Arzarua, you're allowed to go into a shul if it's raining outside. So, we're breathing a little easier. Now I understand. Now I could schmooze with my friends.
But they go on to say a pasuk. Say a pasuk and go.
Rabbi say. So Tosfos says shul Tanai only helps b'chorbanon. Rashi says even when it's being used. We have a third shita. The shita of the Ramban. Ramban says, in a nutshell, like Rashi, that you're allowed to use a shul, be yeshuvan, the Tanai helps, that you could use a shul when the shul is being used, but only b'shas hadchak. Only under pressing circumstances. For example, you have aniyim. You want to feed the aniyim. Nobody's house is big enough. So where do you feed them? In the shul. How are you allowed to use the shul? Because the shuls in Bavar are built al Tanai, that if you really, really, really need to, and you have no alternative, and you have no choice, you could use the shul for a neutral purpose. To do your tax return, you still can't do. To schmooze with your friend, you still can't do. By the way, even according to Rashi, I just want to point out, even according to Rashi, who says the Tanai helps when the shul is being used, you still can't do cheshbonos in the shul. And you certainly can't talk.
So you see, this
One second. You certainly can't talk. But the Ramban agrees to Rashi that you could use a shul for eating only if it's a shas hadchak. Take a look at the Ramban. Lefikach Parshas Ramban, this is quoted by the Ran in the Gila Daf Tetzaveh Beis, in the Daf Yarif. Shal Tanai Hin Asuyos, Hainu Le'inyan, Shem Hutzruchu Anshe Ha'ir Lahacha Behen Aniyim. If you need to feed the poor, Oy Lahashkivam Sham, or you need a place, you have homeless people, they have nowhere to sleep, Mutter. V'uadin L'chol Tzarchei Aniyim L'fi Shah. And then the Ramban says on the third line, Aval Shaloi B'shas Hadchak Asur. You can't use a shul for anything Shaloi B'shas Hadchak. And by the way, why are Talmidei Chacham allowed to eat in a shul? Also, because if they're going to have to get up every second, then they're not going to learn, so that's also B'shas Hadchak. So Rabbi said we have three opinions in the Rishonim. Tosfos is the most machmer. According to Tosfos, the Tanai only helps B'chorbanon. And even B'chorbanon, you can't do a davar bizayon. Rashi says the most cool edict. The Tanai helps even when the shul is functioning, but again, not for a davar bizayon. Not for asking your friend, what happened last night. And according to Tais and according to the Ramban, you're allowed to use a shul even when the shul is functioning, b'shas hadchak. So now the question is, who do we paskin like? Do we paskin like Tosfos? Do we paskin like Ramban? Or do we paskin like Rashi? Says the Shulchan Aruch. You tell me. Okay? Maram Bet Yosef. Take a look. Look at number 11. In B'shas Binyan Beis HaK'nesses, when you built the shul, Hisnu Alav, you made a Tanai, L'hishtamish by, to use it, Mutter L'hishtamish by, B'chorbanai. You're allowed to use the shul when it's in disuse. Aval B'yishuvai Loi Mahani Tina. But when the shul is being used, the Tanai doesn't help.
Like Tosfot.
Who's Shulchan Aruch Paskin like?
Tosfot.
Are you allowed to eat shalashudas in a shul?
No.
Are you allowed to do your tax return in a shul? No. Are you allowed to go into a shul because of the snow? No. Yeah, but if the shul's not being used, then you can. How's that can help me? But the Shulchan Aruch, that's how he paskins. Va'afilu b'chorbanoi letashmish meguna kegoin zriya b'cheshbono shel rabim lo'imahani tonight. The shul wants to do its finances in the shul. Can't do it. Even b'chorbanoi. That's Psak of Shulchan Aruch. Ramah doesn't say anything.
So how come we're doing this today?
So what are we doing today?
We drink, we do...
Says the Taz.
Taz.
Nearly.
Turezav.
The Levi.
Yeah.
The Taz was the father-in-law of the Bach. Yeah? The Taz was, the son-in-law of the Bach. Son-in-law of the Bach.
They had the Din Torah.
So how is the Shidduch made? So the Bach once said to the Taz, I have a daughter who's as beautiful as the moon. So the Taz says, I want to be Mekadesh Levana. Fine. I heard that from Avigdor Miller. Okay, so the Taz says like this. Nearly, the Orchim Shari.
This is nice.
The Orchim Shari Lechosham. You're allowed to feed guests in the shul. Who is that like?
This is like
the Ramban. So Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tosfos. The Taz paskins like Ramban. Bottom line, who do we paskin like? Says the Chafetz Chaim in the Bir Halacha. Hine b'perusha de sugya the altanai hena suyos yesh kama shitas. There are many opinions. Hainu shitas taisis v'harash to be yeshuvay loy mahani tanai. When the shul is being used, the tanai doesn't help with a charbane mahani, and when the shul is fallen into disuse, a tanai helps. That's shita 1. Shita 2, shitas Rashi v'Zarua.
We didn't see that Shitat Rosh.
I didn't have it on the sheet, but the Rush also agrees with Taisus, right? Okay, so that's the first Shita, Taisus and the Rush. Shita number 2, v'shitas Rashi v'Zarua, the afilu b'yeshuvay mahani tanai. V'shitas Haramban v'Haran, v'chein das Harajva, the afilu b'charbanon. Even when the shul is in disuse, loy mahani tanai, sheyishtamshu by lahedya b'shalai midoichek. These Rishonim hold that a tanai does not help even when the shul is destroyed to use it if it's not a shas hadchak. Avo kishu midoichek, but b'shas hadchak afilu b'yeshuvan mahani tanai. So says the Chafetz Chaim, how do I paskin? So we would say, how could you go against the Shulchan Aruch? Shulchan Aruch paskins like Taisus. V'hine, af shehamechaber hetik ladina de b'yeshuva loy mahani tanai. Even though the mechaber paskins like Taisus, mikamakam nira midivrei hataz. It seems from the Taz in the beginning of the Siman. Techshu midoichek v'chanal yesh lismach al Ramban. We hold the Taz implies that in b'shas hadchak you could rely on the Ramban that da'afilu b'yeshuvay mahani. Right. And says the Mishnah Berurah, do I agree with the Taz that you can rely on Ramban? Oh yeah. The hadin imay shekenu gankin das haran. The Hagaraja. And Rashi and the Arzaru are even more makel. They're makel that you could use it even shalai b'shas hadchak. V'gam yesh l'tzarv l'zeh das Rashi v'Arzaru the tefillah da'afir b'shum mahani tanai. V'da'oid that even according to Rashi and the Arzaru the mahani tanai afir b'yeshuvan v'kamakam l'kalas roish mamish. Kalas roish could go in schaik, laughing, v'hitol and joking, v'chayotzevay pshita d'loy mahani. Why? Because even cheshbonos are aser. So bottom line, Rabbi say, halacha l'maisa, says the Chafetz Chaim, we paskin like the Taz, who paskins like the Ramban, that b'shas hadchak you could eat in a shul. Why? So that means if you have 100 aniyim and nobody's house fits the aniyim, you can have them eat in the shul. Could you do your tax return in the shul? No. Yeah. Could you talk to your friend about nonsense? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. So anything which is, anything which is, no, not a mitzvah, anything b'shas hadchak, to feed aniyim, oh yeah, that's true, it's a mitzvah, that's not the reason. The reason is because of b'shas hadchak, you need to do something neutral, okay? Then you're allowed to do it. But, halacha l'maisa, according to the Taz and the Mishnah Berurah, are you allowed to eat shalosh shudas in a shul? Absolutely not. Why? It's not b'shas hadchak to eat shalosh shudas in the shul. You go home, and you go home. Why do you all have to sit on this table? You know? What do you need? There's no minyan. There's no inyan of a minyan for shalosh shudas. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, according to the Mishnah Berurah, you cannot eat shalosh shudas in the shul. Of course not. It's not b'shas hadchak. It's not b'shas hadchak.
But what about?
Could you have a tikkun in a shul? No. Of course not.
What?
A tikkun, after for a yard site to give, schnapps and chichol. It's not a. Says.
Where's the shul? Is it when you cross this door here? When you cross the front?
Yeah, the sanctuary. Yeah, the other part is just whether the hallway of the shul has kedushas Beis HaK'nesses. It's a different sugya. Okay.
So we're talking
about the actual shul. Yeah.
What is that of kamina between Bet Midrash and Ben Shul?
Okay, there are other for Talmid Chachamim that learn their bekviyos, but in terms of what we're discussing today,
they learn in the shul.
So good, but that doesn't change the halacha of talking and eating.
No, not talking about eating. Most of the shul they eat in all the shuls because the land there is
for a Talmid Chacham who learns their bekviyos, then there's a certain leniency with eating because that's considered b'shas hadchak. But someone who just learns an hour a day, that's not considered b'shas hadchak. Again. This is where we're up to right now. According to the Chafetz Chaim, when are you allowed to use a shul for something neutral? B'shas hadchak. So we're pretty much still in trouble. Right? Because you want to say that about... Now, how about a sudas bar mitzvah? Is a sudas bar mitzvah... A sudas mitzvah? Says the Chafetz Chaim, even if it is, says Rav Moshe, even if it's a ksas mitzvah, you still can't do it in the shul, only b'shas hadchak. So make it at home, make it in a catering hall. You have to do it in the shul itself. So Moshe over here saves the day, but not as much as you think. Says Rav Moshe, this question was asked to Rav Moshe by Harav Pinchas Teitz, the Rav of Elizabeth, New Jersey. And the question was whether somebody, Loyaleno, he is blind, and he can't go into shul unless he has a seeing eye dog. So is a seeing eye dog, bringing a dog into a shul, is that a bizayon for the shul? Is that a neutral for a shul? Is it permitted for somebody who cannot see without a dog, cannot function without a dog, is he allowed to bring the dog into the shul? That's the question. So Moshe says an amazing thing over here. Take a look at number 14. On the third, he says, Meis Kvod Yedidi Harav Hagoyin HaMeforsam Moreno Rav Pinchas Mordechai Teitz Hagoyin HaVezin Alizabat Shlita Shalom Ubracha Hine Bedvar Hasuma, a blind man Asher Lamdu Lekelev Lahilichai. He was trained, the dog was trained to take him. The dog needs to be next to him. Im yachal ikanes to Beis HaK'nesses lespala b'tzibur. Could he enter to daven b'tzibur v'leshmaya kaddish or kedusha, kriyas haTorah, kriyas hamegillah v'chadayma? Or do we say it's a bizayon to bring the dog into the Beis HaK'nesses? Now, Rabbi say, if it would be a bizayon to bring the dog into the Beis HaK'nesses, even Rashi would say you can't do it, because Rashi says the Tanai only helps for a neutral thing, but not for a bizayon. So, says Rav Moshe Feinstein Zechatzak L'Vracha. Okay, there's the Igros Moshe, Archaim Aleph, Siman Memhei.
What about the goy that's cleaning the shul? And he have a cross in his neck.
He's that's not a bizarre. You tell him to put it in his shirt. You know?
Yeah?
Maybe, yeah. Now Rabbi says Rav Moshe, eating and drinking in a shul. Does a Tanai help to eat and drink in a shul? Well, the Ramban, and the Ran brings the Ramban, that a Tanai helps to eat in a shul if you need to feed aniyim and put them to sleep over there, b'shas hadchak. Says Rav Moshe, yeah, but the Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin like the Ramban. Right? Look on the top line on the left-hand side. V'yavshe b'Shulchan Aruch, se'if yadalef mashma shepasak d'olai mahani Tanai. That's what we read in number 11. Nevertheless, in Sivkat and Beis, he brings the opinion of the Hagoy Sashri in the name of the Arzarua that a Tanai helps b'shas hadchak. And the Hagra in Sivkat and Hay brings the Ran in the name of the Ramban that a Tanai helps for anybody b'shas hadchak. Umashma shapoisakain. Says Rav Moshe, I full-heartedly endorse the psak of the Chafetz Chaim that we could, even though the Shulchan Aruch doesn't go like the Ramban, you could paskin like the Ramban. V'chein shapir pasuk HaMishnah Berurah that sheyesh lismach al Ramban shekain savri gamaran v'haraj v'lahater afilu b'yeshuvan at least b'shas hadchak. Says Rav Moshe, not only is the Chafetz Chaim paskening like this, but Klal Yisrael paskening like this. Klal Yisrael certainly seems to be relying on the Ramban that b'shas hadchak you could use a shul for something that's not a bizayon. Uchim medumani shebeharbe mekaymos noyagin lahakel af shaloi b'shas hadchak. Rav Moshe says, it seems to me that there are a lot of people that are being lenient, even shalai b'shas hadchak. Uletzarech mitzvah k'tzas, even for something that's a little bit of a mitzvah. For example, k'gon lecho shalashudas b'Shabbos. He says, Afshein sarach gadol. There's a big need to eat shalashudas in the shul. Shar yochel kol echad lecha b'beisai. So make mincha 10 minutes earlier and eat shalashudas at home. What do you have to eat shalashudas in the shul for? But nevertheless, noyagin kemat v'chol ha'makaris lahater. So what do we see from here? That the minhag in Klal Yisrael is to rely on the Ramban, that even when it's not mamish b'shas hadchak, you're allowed to use a shul for a neutral purpose. And we even make a kiddush for an afraf or a bar mitzvah, even though we will be very hard pressed to find that it's actually a mitzvah to make such a kiddush. He says, it could be, it's not clear there's a mitzvah to make such a kiddush. Now listen to this. And the Hasidim take it even further. Now if you ask the Hasidim, they'll tell you that this is mamish a big mitzvah. But Rav Moshe doesn't buy into that. Rav Moshe says almost every shul makes a sudas harashus for a yard site, a kibud. Says Rav Moshe, there is no mitzvah to make a kibud by a yard site. It's not. It's completely sudas rishus. It's not an Indian. It's not an Indian. Kibud, tikkun, yard site, schnapps, whatever you want to call it, right? whatever you want to call it, says Ramosha v'hachasidim noyagin b'chabate knesiyah shalahen lahater af b'dvar rishus mamish kahal da'achilo shtia b'yam ha'yortzeit. Says Ramosha, how are the Hasidim doing this? Don't tell me it's a shas hadchak, and don't tell me it's a mitzvah. You know what the answer is, says Ramosha? That even though the Shulchan Aruch is machmir like Tosfos, and the Taz is even more lenient like the Ramban, but Minhag Klal Yisrael is to be even more lenient like Rashi. Wow. But none of the earlier poskim paskin that way. Says Rav Moshe, a very big yesod, that if you see that Klal Yisrael is noyeg a certain way, that creates the psak halacha. Says Rav Moshe, Imkein Mukhrachan Loimar. Right? Puk Chazi Ma'amad Daber. Imkein Mukhrachan Loimar. We are forced to say, listen to what Rav Moshe is saying, Shenoyagin Kirashi. That Minhag Yisrael is like Rashi. Va'agoy Sashri b'Shem Or Zarua. Shemuter al Tanai afilu b'Yishuvan la'achila u'shtia af b'loy doichek. Says Rav Moshe b'nimtza shenifsak ato kein lahalacha. It comes out, that's the psak halacha. Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tosfos, Taz paskins like Ramban, Chafetz Chaim paskins like Ramban, Klal Yisrael is lenient like Rashi. So what? But maybe they're doing the wrong thing. No. If that's what Klal Yisrael does, if in every shul in the world they make a kibbutz, they make a yahrzeit, they serve schnapps, even though says Rav Moshe it's not a mitzvah, that means they're nemming on, they're paskening, Klal Yisrael is paskening like Rashi.
That doesn't let the people in Eretz Yisrael off.
Oh no, Eretz Yisrael is still in hot water, yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So Rabbi, and then Rav Moshe goes on to prove that even by an Indian which is Dairaisa, if Klal Yisrael is noyig a certain way, that will create the halacha, and certainly by this Indian, which is perhaps only midrabanan.
What was the psak on the seeing eye to it? What was the psak?
Oh, we didn't get to that yet. Says Rav Moshe.
In Eretz Yisrael, don't know kibbutz?
I don't know.
There's no Tanai.
But here's the thing. A minhag could only establish what the halacha is if there is such an opinion. There is no opinion there is no halachic opinion that in Eretz Yisrael you're allowed to do it. So what they do, Rav Moshe feels is irrelevant. In other words, minhag can't break the halacha. Minhag, in other words, even though people say minhag oikar halacha, it's not true. Minhag is not oikar halacha. What minhag will do is, if you have a viable rishain who holds a certain way, so even though maybe the poskim don't paskin that way, if the minhag is like that, das yachid, the minhag will allow you to be saimech on the das yachid. But if there is no das yachid, it's just minhag, that doesn't stand. Okay? So in Eretz Yisrael, what they do?
They do.
Hopefully they do the right thing.
They do. They eat and do everything.
In the shul?
Yeah.
Okay. So
outside and everything.
okay. So Rabbi say. So Rav Moshe coming back to the sing eye dog. Says Rav Moshe, a sing eye dog is no different than eating and drinking. And, right, it's not less than eating and drinking. It's not a bizayon. So since it's not a bizayon, he says, we anyway hold like the Ramban that a Tanai.
This is bizarre.
That's why there is.
Yeah. We hold that.
This is the topic. He give us a good example.
Exactly, right.
He's a good student.
Okay. So Rabbi said, bottom line is, says Rav Moshe, bring the sing eye dog into the shul is not any worse. Rabbi said it's not any worse than eating and drinking. And says Rav Moshe, certainly ein lecha shas hadcha gadol mizeh, that if you don't let this person into the shul, the way he says he'll never be able to sit down with the minyan, he'll never hear kriyas haTorah, he'll never hear kriyas haMegillah, and certainly yom naram, it's going to cause him tremendous agmas nefesh. So it's mamish b'shas hadchak. So therefore, even like the Chafetz Chaim, where we're only making like the Ramban, it would be mutter because it's no less than eating and drinking. And even b'chlal, says Rav Moshe, we're making like Rashi that even shaloi b'shas hadchak, you're allowed to eat and drink in a shul. Okay? But what about talking? Are you allowed to talk to your friend in a shul? Based on everything we learned today, it is absolutely clear. Absolutely not.
Wow.
You can't do it. You can't do it. So Rabbi said, one minute. Right? So Rabbi said, so it comes out that the Chafetz Chaim said, even, that's how he concluded. Chafetz Chaim said, even according to Rashi, a Tanai doesn't help to sit down and write your budget. So how could it, so it doesn't help to sit and talk to your friend. So what rationalization is there? What hamlasa is there? Now, before I give any rationalization, I want to say something very important, that this is b'chlal, for some reason, not on our radar. That there's a mitzvah in the Torah, umikdashi tiro, you have to be afraid at the Beis HaMikdash. Now, probably most people could understand, if you go to the Kaisa, probably many people could have the feeling, you know what, this is not a place to catch up and when you meet somebody. This is a Makom Kadosh, you want to talk, so you move, I think people could have that hargasha. And I think many people do have that hargasha. But for some reason in a shul, it is something which is completely not on the radar, that you can't just talk in a shul. It's clear. I'm not telling you a chumrah over here. According to the halacha, it could be an isser d'oraisa. Okay? Right? So this is something we should be aware of. That there is something in the Torah called the Mikdashi Tiro, and it does not allow you to do certain things in a shul. So bottom line, is there any justification, any rationalization? So I saw something that's, I think, pretty reasonable. By the way, the Chafetz Chaim, in the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, when he talks about Lashon Hara, he comes to the same conclusion, that that for Dvarim B'Telim, that tonight does not help. And he brings down here, I have a Sefer on the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, it's called Nesiv Chaim. He brings down over here that the Pri Megadim says, the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Kuf Nun Aleph says, that even if you need to talk to somebody about Parnasa, right? So this is not idle chatter. You're looking for a job. Are you allowed to ask someone in a shul, maybe you have a job for me? Chafetz Chaim says you can't do that. You can't do that. However, so the Nesiv Chaim says like this. It's pashat that a short conversation, he says, I'll read to you the words. Nera pashat. Shasicha kitzara shel derech eretz v'kavod habriyos mutaras. A short conversation of derech eretz, in other words, good morning, how are you? Hope you had a good day yesterday. A short conversation is mutter. He says that's considered b'chlal sicha shel mitzvah. The same way you're allowed to make a cheshbon of a mitzvah, you're allowed to have a conversation of a mitzvah. In other words, you want to have a short, brief, you want to say good morning, how are you? Hope all is good, it's wonderful to see you. That's mutter. And he says you could see even the Reishis Chachma, who's tremendously marach about sicha b'teila in a Beis HaK'nesses, he ends off that if somebody who's an Am Haaretz comes to you and starts talking to you about their business, you can answer them very briefly. Oh, okay, good. Business by me is also good. Well, how are you allowed to do that? But you're not talking to shul. The answer is something very brief, just to keep the peace, just to keep the friendship. That's considered under the umbrella of Devar Mitzvah. And he says also, what?
It's different than Shul.
Not just Shul, right? A little bit. This is B'chlal Sicha Shal Mitzvah. He even says, Dibur Shal Achva Fereyos. You want to show closeness to your friend. You want to show friendship. You want to ask him how's your family, how are the kids, how are your parents, and so forth. This you could sort of rationalize, or for real, or reasonably explain that this is Sicha Shel Mitzvah. But Rabbi say, but it should cause a certain awareness that before you start talking in a shul, and I'm telling you, this is not something that you're going to pick up after one shiur, because it's so far off the radar that it's hard to develop. But this is something that a person really should try to develop, and that is, speaking in a shul is not free reign. There's a misconception. Oh, there's a t'nai in a shul. A t'nai in a shul only helps for eating and drinking. It doesn't help for sicha b'teila. So you want to say, but this type of conversation is a dvar mitzvah, wonderful. That means you have to make a cheshbon. When you talk in a shul, it should be b'cheshbon. It should be contemplated. You want to show friendship. It's not the place to start, okay, let's make a plan now how, you have a partner in your work. Let's sit down now and we're going to talk about how we're going to get better business. Move it outside. Move it out. Okay, so Rabbi said, this is what we learned from the inyan of the Kedushas Beis HaK'nesses and Mikdashi Tiro. Shuvizaycha to the binyan Beis HaMikdash. Meher v'yameinu amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.